Hey everybody, it's Jay Allen, CarGuy, talking tips today, and here today we are going to talk about leasing. I get questions about it all the time. Why should people lease a vehicle as opposed to an outright purchase, where you take the full purchase price of a vehicle and you spread that out over 60 months or 72 months or sometimes even 84 months, which is 5, 6, or 7 years for a car loan. And I want to ask everybody, have you been upside down? And what that means is you owe more on a vehicle than it's worth. And to get out of that car, you have to come to the table with money down, or buy a car where that money is accounted for and traded in, and ultimately the amount that you owe gets added to the next vehicle. Well, leasing is a very unique way of financing a vehicle, but also gives you options, and it also protects that ability to never be upside down. So I'm going to explain the way I see leasing and the way it can help you in the future. Okay, so we're going to start right over here with leasing. Why lease? Well, there's a lot of benefits to leasing, and most importantly, they open up options. And you'll have 3 options at the end of a lease, which you can decide. One of them is to drive the term of the lease and buy the vehicle for the payoff. That means it's just like you purchased it all the way through, and I'll explain in a second why that could be a beneficial thing for you to lease it first and then buy it, knowing you're going to keep it forever. And then another option would be to sell it to somebody else for above the residual, which is the guaranteed predicted value of a vehicle at the beginning of a lease. Okay? And then another option is just turn it in and be done with it, and come pick you up another car, and you're guaranteed not to be upside down when you lease, because that's what manufacturers do when they predict a residual, a guaranteed predicted value. I would write that up there, guaranteed predicted value, because that is the kicker right there. So we're going to use a 2020 Camry LE lease. Now the MSRP of this car, for round numbers sake, is $22,000. And the residual is $13,000. So how this pans out is this is the beginning of your loan, and this is if you were to finance the entire $22,000 right here. Now, if we go all the way down the line here, and right in the middle is $13,000. If you lease a vehicle, you are only paying tax and payments on $13,000 of this over the course of 3 years. Most leases run for 36 months, some run for 24 months, and they also split them up into mileage. Most of them are at 12,000 miles a year or 15,000 miles a year. And I'll get into how those mileage affects you if you're a type that drives more or drives less. I'll get into how that affects you in a second. But when you lease this, you get this same 2020 Camry LE at a $22,000 car for $13,000 for 3 years. I call that paying for the portion of the vehicle that you use. Let's assume that the vehicle was totally finished at the end of the loan, which we all know they aren't. That's just when you're finished paying for it. This is just saying I'm going to get this $22,000 Camry LE for only $13,000's worth of payments over the course of 3 years. That's attractive in a lot of ways, because you get the same car without having to buy the whole thing. So that goes into one of the options right here. There's numerous options, but because of it's only $13,000 on a $22,000 car, you get smaller payments. You get the same car. You might be able to step up to the next model line or the next package level with a little bit more equipment, knowing it's going to be in a payment range you can afford because you're only paying for the portion of the vehicle that you use. Ask about leasing when you enter dealerships, and ask where do the residuals fall on the car that you're looking for. Once again, that's that guaranteed predicted value. I've already said this, you pay for the portion of the vehicle you use, but you still get the full vehicle. It's a beautiful thing. And you're guaranteed to never be upside down. So if this 2020 Camry LE in 3 years is worth $12,000, that's what the market says it's worth. You were to go to trade it in, somebody would give you $12,000 for it. You are guaranteed to not take that hit. You do not owe that $1,000. In this case, Toyota is guaranteeing that vehicle is going to be worth $13,000 3 years from now. If it's worth less, you don't take that hit. If it's worth more, you can sell it to a friend of yours for $14,000. Pocket the $1,000, pay off the $13,000, and that's a way out of a lease. Or you can turn the vehicle in, be done with it, or we can take it in and us as dealers, we ground leases. That means we're like the middleman for Toyota Financial Services. That's who most of our leasing goes through. And we take the vehicle in if we are not going to personally trade for it. Because look, if a vehicle is worth $12,000 and it's owed $13,000, we don't want it either. We want it at $13,000, and that's what the market says it's worth, and that's when it's worth it for us to treat it like a trade-in, and then we make the payoff for you, and we get the trade-in. But if it's not worth it and the value is less than the residual at the time, we're going to park it, and Toyota Financial Services is going to come pick it up because the vehicle belongs to them. So moving forward, you're never upside down. If you're over, if you have the value and you go to trade it in and it's worth $14,000, whatever you pick out next, we'll trade this vehicle in. You'll get $14,000 worth of credit towards the next car, and that $1,000 you'll pick that up. That means you actually saved $1,000 in the financing process of when you drove the 2020. So here's some of the fears of leasing. I drive too much. I have a lot of people say that, and leasing is honestly not for everybody, but for people that think that they can't lease because they drive 20,000 miles a year or more, doesn't mean you can't still lease a vehicle and it not be the best option for you. So, and then the damage bill after the lease. People don't like turning in a lease and getting a bill after the fact. That's not fun either, because typically the two things that any manufacturer cares about the most with a lease is the tires and the windshield. Now I'm going to explain more about the dings per panel and the scratches in the interior and stuff like that and how that stuff pans out. But a tire with less than 3/16 tread depth, the tires are going to have to be replaced. They can't trade them in with bald tires on them. And no cracks in the windshield. That is a National Highway Transit Safety Authority regulation. An off-lease vehicle cannot have a cracked windshield without being replaced. And if the cracked windshield happened under your ownership, you're going to be responsible for that windshield. Those are the two that nobody can get around. I'm not saying you can get around any of this stuff, but I'm about to tell you what I believe is some leniency when it comes to turning in a leased vehicle. At least a Toyota for that matter. So there are some other fears, but these are the main two. And let's go into talking about the damage. Okay, let me go back real fast. Let me say, for somebody that drives 20,000 miles a year, and they know that they're going to have it for 3 years, so they're going to put 60,000 miles on this thing. If they did a 3-year lease, with 15,000 miles per year. So that's a total of 45,000 miles, 45K miles. There we go. All right, so we know we're going to drive 60,000 miles. We're going to put 5,000 miles extra per year on this car. And nobody wants to be hit with not planned for expenses after the fact. Well, if you know you drive your car 20,000 miles a year and you know you're going to, you can buy those miles up front. And this is what's crazy is a lot of people assume that they're really expensive. Toyota charges 10 cents per mile to prepay for those miles up front. So for every 5,000 miles, we're talking $500. That's it. To buy 15,000 extra miles will cost $1,500. Which makes the residual go down to what would be $11,500. And if you knew it and you planned for these miles up front, your residual just moves to $11,500, and you bought 60,000 miles instead of 45. That's a beautiful thing. It's not near as bad as people think. Well, oops, what if you didn't plan for it? You got a job right after you leased the car, and then you drove 20,000 miles a year. You'll still do the same 60,000 miles, but you did not plan for those extra 5 every year. It's a whopping 15 cents per mile. Most people think that this is going to really hurt them after the fact, and I'm not saying it's cheap, but it's not as bad as it sounds. That is $750 for every 5,000 miles per year, which is $2,250 instead of $1,500. So then that residual would go down by $2,250. But if you think about it, in the grand scheme of things, you drove 15,000 miles. That's almost a year's worth of extra driving for $2,250. You couldn't rent a vehicle and put that many miles on a car for that price. And that's how this works. So that's just something to know, is to know what are the miles cost when you buy them up front, And then what are they if you didn't buy them up front, if you're quote unquote penalized? I don't think 15 cents a mile is a bad thing at all. And let me put it in perspective. When people come and want to buy demos that I drive or our general manager drives and it's got 2,000 miles on it, and they'll say, oh, I want $2,000 off the price of that car. We'll say, well, why can we value a mile at the same price that Toyota values a mile, which would mean we give a $200 discount. Now, I'm laughing because I know that most people would not accept a $200 discount with a car with 2,000 miles on it. And most likely we would probably give them more than that. But to know that Toyota values a mile at 10 cents per mile, that's a big deal. And it's not as bad as people assume. So it's a way to plan and prepare for how to handle your lease when you come in. So now let's address the fears. I want to go to, so I've addressed the mileage and the fear of going over the miles or I drive too much. Now let's address the damage that is normal, considered normal wear and tear for a leased vehicle. And when you turn in that leased vehicle, how does that damage affect you? Now bear with my diagram here. This is the roof of a vehicle. This is a passenger door, a driver door, a rear passenger door, a rear passenger behind the driver door. So we've got these. This is a rear fender well, the back hood, a trunk, and then the front hood, front fender well, bumpers. So what I did was kind of diagram out from a car, like you're looking down on the car, the panels that exist on a vehicle. Sometimes there's even more panels because you got to take maybe a trunk lid bottom down there or a front grille could be considered a panel. But Toyota allows 5 dings per panel. So let's picture even a hailstorm or the worst case scenarios or just anything. So we're going to start dinging up panels here. So the trunk, that gets a lot of stuff, right? Maybe 3 dings on there. And then the fender also has 2 or 3, and then 1, and then, oh, the doors, yeah, they're all over by the handle. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there, and then 2 on this one. The driver door is used often, so there's 3 there, and this and that. And then a couple on the hood, you know. And then we go there, and let's say we've got 1 panel that doesn't have anything. So we are allowed 5 dings per panel. Would everybody agree that this is a pretty messed up vehicle? You would be pretty, I won't say ashamed, but you'd be pretty upset if you were going to turn in a vehicle in this, or if you had to go to a body shop or wherever to fix all these things. Well, a Toyota lease allows 5 dings per panel on an external. That's a pretty messed up car, but you would not owe $1 for those panels. Now, the way that applies to the interior of the car, you are allowed up to a 5-inch tear. Now, not 6 inches, but a 5-inch tear in the headliner. That's forgivable. When it comes to the seats and the cushions and the different things in there, it's much more lenient than people think. The mission is to have people release vehicles, so it's not to hit you on a bunch of damage, but obviously a better taken care of car is a better car to trade in. So that explains the damage on the external part of the vehicle and the interior and how to think about how you need to take care of a leased vehicle. All right, so now I'm going to explain the last little bits of what to look for when you're looking for a lease and sometime where a situation for a lease might not make sense for you. Money down makes your payments less, whether you're financing the vehicle or purchasing the vehicle. But when you're only paying $13,000 for a 2020 Camry LE, money down, there's such thing as a one-pay lease where you pay the $13,000 plus the taxes that are added. I mean, we can't get away from the tax man. And then that's a one-pay lease, and you get to drive that car for 3 years and then turn it in and be done with it. Or there's always good lease incentives on volume vehicles, okay? Lease incentives are always on Camrys, they're always on RAV4s, they're always on Tundras. The incentive changes from month to month, and that's something to stay abreast of. Not every car has a great lease incentive. And if it doesn't have a great lease incentive, the situation could change. If it's not an incentivized lease rate, that's something to pay attention to. When you come in, you get $1,000 off a so-and-so Camry, or a certain interest rate. There's also the same with lease rates. And I have seen lease rates as low as 0.00100. I've even seen them as low as 0.00001. That happened one time. And guess what? We bought our parts truck on a lease with that rate behind it. It's almost like 0% for leasing. But that's a great lease incentive rate. But if you start seeing rates that are 430. I mean, this is how the lease factors are quantified, and I'm not the expert to say that that's like 4.3% interest or 1% interest. Do that research on your own, but these are the rates to be watching out for. These are the rates to strike when it's hot, because what that means is you're really getting $13,000 if you qualify for that incentivized lease rate. Those are the vehicles to be looking for. Let's say you can do one-pay leases. You can put a lot of money. If you put $4,000 down, or if you're trading something that you owe $14,000 on it and it's worth $18,000, that $4,000 gets immediately applied to this, and you're now leasing. You're splitting payments of $9,000 on this car if you were putting $4,000 down on this car, which means you're making payments for 3 years on $9,000. That's a sweet deal for a 2020 Camry LE. This helps people get into vehicles that they never thought they could get into. I see a lot when I lived in South Florida, I saw a lot of entry-level BMWs and Mercedes, and they were as common as they are Camrys, Corollas, Hondas, you name it, mass volume cars, because the lease incentives in these high-end markets are just crazy, and that's what they encourage people to do, and it makes the cycle go faster where people are buying and trading quicker. But it also lets people step up in vehicle. That's the beauty of it. Lets you step up in vehicle, because if you know if your payment is okay around $13,000, that spread out amongst 60 months or however, then you would be looking at a $13,000 car otherwise if you were looking to finance the entire thing. This is just the benefit of leasing, and you get a brand new car every time. It's a brand new car. This is a big deal, y'all. So I hope this has really taken some of the fear out of leasing. I hope that next time you go to approach buying a vehicle, you'll consider leasing. Stay on top of the incentives, stay on top of all the dealers' websites, whatever car you're looking for, and this is what you want to find out as quickly as possible, whether the Camry you're looking for, and that's the sticker price, what is the residual? And I feel the need to write it. It's that guaranteed predicted value. And that's like saying it's going to be worth this in 3 years, no matter what. You'll never take the hit if it's not worth that. Who would not to like to ever be upside down again? I agree. I want everybody to know this and understand leasing and why that they could at least not be afraid of it. And now you got the right questions to ask when you go in there. This is Toyota, by the way. Toyota's 10 cents per mile and 15 cents per mile after the fact, the 5 dings per panel, the different tread depths, the windshield. I'm not certain about other manufacturers. Their terms might be a little different. These are things that you need to find out if you're considering leasing another brand of vehicle. But for Toyota, this is how it flows, and it's a very good option. We lease about 15% of all the cars that we sell, sometimes higher. So it's been a very good thing for us, and it's been a very good thing for our customers. Lets people get in and out of new stuff more often and not take a financial hit every time they do. So if you like trading every 3 years and you like driving a new vehicle, leasing could be for you. Come check us out at Allen Toyota. Maybe we'll find the right one for you. It's Jay Allen, CarGuy Talking Tips. Thanks for bearing with me on the whiteboard this time. We'll see you next week.